Welcome to Scrim's Grim Tales. I'm Scrim, the storyteller. Well, you knew that already, because it's my voice coming out of the speaker, isn't it? Unless you're lazy and you haven't got Anyway, our first story is about how stories were made in the first place. And it concerns a very mysterious man known as the storyteller. The storyteller had an enormous long beard that ran all the way down to his hairy feet. He had enormous hands as big as baby dolphins and feet the size of small cars. But in his head, which was rather small, were thousands of stories. You must understand, this was in the days before television, before people had cockfights, no wonder they all got the plague, before the radio. This was at the time when all people could do to have fun, apart from kill each other and have wars which were rotten anyway, was tell stories. And everybody would gather in the town square to listen to the storyteller every single evening under the old apple tree. Years passed, and the storyteller began to grow old, and things started to be invented. Stories didn't start becoming as useful as they used to. Somebody decided that tennis would be a great sport. Then some other chap invented football. And then, worst of all, somebody called Mr. T Vision invented the telly, and the storyteller became very lonely. People didn't come and listen to the stories anymore, and they didn't sit under the old apple tree anymore. So the storyteller became a hermit in his own house, surrounded by all his old stories. He piled them in cupboards and under his bed, some in the kitchen, some in the shed, some in the oven, some in the bath. Some were even hidden in the storyteller's pyjama pocket. And unfortunately, because there was nobody to tell stories to and nothing to do, the storyteller became ill. Mrs. Storyteller had packed up and moved off years ago and taken the video recorder. Well, the storyteller never used it. And one night, while the storyteller lay in his sickbed, he had a strange dream. He was visited by a spider, an enormous hairy spider, whose name was Jeff. Well, he said his name was Jeff, but his real name was Geoffrey. And the spider said, in a very spidery voice, "Now listen, Geoffrey. No, Geoffrey's my name, isn't it? I'll start that bit again. Now listen, storyteller. You are dying. Which is no surprise, because you're over 1,000 years old, aren't you? And I'm sure you're looking forward to what lies ahead of you. But you've forgotten one thing. What will happen to all your stories? You see, people still need stories to make their radio programs radio and their television programs telly. We need stories, storyteller. You must find a way to spread your stories all over the world." And with that, Geoffrey disappeared. Well, the storyteller didn't waste any time. He didn't wait for his alarm clock to sound as though it was waking the dead. No, he got straight out of bed. He ran into his bathroom, drank all his bathwater, he was so excited, and then had a bath again, then had an enormous breakfast of 32 sausages, 43 boiled eggs, 63 rashers of bacon, and a whole field of fried potatoes. "Oh, that was delicious," said the storyteller, and then he set to work. He began to gather together all the plastic bags that the nice man from Sainsbury's bought every week when he did his shopping. And he began to look for stories. He found them in the cupboard, he found them in his bed, he found them in the kitchen, and he found them in the shed. He found them in the toilet, and he found them in the washer. He even found some behind an old record player that some person had given him for a Christmas present and he never used. And he put them all into the bags. This took nearly the whole day, because there were that many stories. And then, when the clock struck 7, the storyteller gathered the bags of stories into a large, big, special story bag that he kept for emergencies. And he opened the door, and he stood out on the doorstep of his house, and he watched as the moon came into the sky. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted to itself. It said, in a very owly-type way. But, what do you mean, an owly-type way? He's not important, I'm the celebrity, this is my story. Anyway, he looked up at the moon, and it shone down in a beautiful way in the sky. You see, the moon is the queen of the whole sky, but this isn't her story, so we'll tell that another time. Anyway, the storyteller held out his enormous arms, and he threw the stories up into the sky. And the moon saw what he was doing, held out her arms, and caught every single story that he threw up there. And as she flew through the sky on her nightly journey all round the world, she scattered the stories every which way. Some in oceans, some in lakes, some in forests, some in cakes, some in houses, some in dens, some for you, some for me, some for Horace, some for Big Ben, some for Joe, and some for Mo, some in the earth, some in the sky, some on the beach, some in a pigsty. Ugh, I'm not getting them out of there. Anyway, by the time the sun came up the next morning, the stories had scattered all over the world, except for this one. You see, this was the story that landed on my doorstep, one that I had to hide, and this is the one I'm telling you just before I died.